The assignment, the exile commander, Elena Vasquez, stared at the transfer orders in her hands, reading them for the fifth time as if the words might magically change. Deep Space Station Echo 9. Perimeter monitoring duty. Indefinite assignment. The paper felt heavier than it should have, weighted with the disappointment of her superiors and the bitter taste of her own defiance. Monitoring the void, she muttered, crushing the orders into a ball. That's what happens when you tell Admiral Morrison exactly what you think of his brilliant battle strategies. The transport shuttle that carried her to Echo 9 was cramped, smelled of recycled air and broken dreams, and took 3 days to reach the station. During the journey, Elena reviewed what little information existed about her new posting. Echo 9 sat at the edge of human space, monitoring a sector so empty that the last recorded ship passage was 18 months ago. It was staffed by a single person and an outdated AI system. Previous commanders had requested transfers after 6 months, citing extreme isolation and equipment malfunctions. Elena wasn't like previous commanders. She was a combat engineer with 22 years of service, holder of the Silver Star for Innovation Under Fire, and possessor of what her file diplomatically called an independent streak. What it didn't mention was her tendency to rebuild military equipment into something far more effective than the original design, often without permission. The station appeared on the viewport like a metallic tumor growing from an asteroid. It was smaller than Elena had expected, roughly the size of a city block, with solar collectors that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in decades. Docking was automatic, controlled by the station's AI, and Elena felt the familiar thump of magnetic clamps securing the shuttle. She gathered her 2 duffel bags, her toolbox, and a crate of personal equipment that definitely wasn't standard issue. The airlock cycled with a wheeze that suggested the filters needed attention. Elena stepped into Echo 9 and immediately wrinkled her nose. The air tasted stale and carried the metallic tang of aging life support systems. "Welcome to Deep Space Station Echo 9, Commander Vasquez," announced a pleasant male voice from speakers embedded in the corridor walls. "I am Marcus, the station's AI companion. I apologize for the current state of the facility." The previous commander departed rather suddenly. Elena dropped her bags and looked around. The corridor was narrow, lined with conduits and cables that created shadows in the dim lighting. Everything looked functional but tired, like a machine running on momentum rather than maintenance. "How suddenly?" she asked. 7 hours after his last supply drop. He claimed he heard voices in the walls and requested immediate evacuation. Medical evaluation found no evidence of psychological distress, but he refused to return. Elena nodded. She'd seen similar reactions in soldiers who'd spent too long in isolated posts. The mind-created company where none existed, then turned that company hostile. "Show me around, Marcus. Let's see what we're working with." The tour revealed a station designed for bare-bones operation. Central command center with monitoring equipment that belonged in a museum. Living quarters that could charitably be called functional. A workshop that contained basic repair tools and not much else. Life support systems that wheezed and hummed with concerning irregularity. And weapon systems that consisted of 2 defensive turrets that hadn't been fired in 3 years. "Marcus, what's our actual defensive capability?" Elena asked, studying a maintenance panel that showed more warning lights than green ones. "Minimal, Commander. The perimeter sensors can detect approaching vessels at a range of 100,000 kilometers. We have 2 pulse cannons rated for light patrol vessel engagement. Our shields are rated for debris impacts and minor energy weapons. Standard protocol for unauthorized intrusion is to issue warnings and request Central Command assistance." Elena laughed, a sound without humor. "And how long does it take for Central Command to respond to a distress call from here?" "Approximately 4 days, assuming no delays." "Perfect." Elena opened her personal crate and began pulling out equipment. A fusion torch that could cut through military-grade hull plating. Quantum processors that exceeded regulation specifications. Power coupling units that shouldn't exist outside of research facilities. "Marcus, how much do you know about creative engineering?" I am programmed with standard maintenance and repair protocols. Is there something specific you require? Elena held up a device that looked like a cross between a sensor array and a weapon. I require you to forget about standard protocols. We're about to make this station earn its keep. First Contact Elena spent her first week learning every system on the station. Marcus proved to be more sophisticated than she'd expected, with learning algorithms that had been steadily improving during his years of isolation. He was curious about her modifications, asking questions that showed genuine intelligence rather than simple programming. Commander, your fusion torch modifications have increased cutting efficiency by 340%. However, this configuration exceeds safety parameters. Safety parameters are for people who don't know what they're doing, Elena replied, welding a new sensor array into the station's hull. She floated in the vacuum of space, tethered to the station by a safety line and protected by a suit that she'd modified with additional life support systems. Are you concerned about safety, Marcus? A pause. In an AI, pauses meant processing time. I am concerned about your survival. If you die, I will be alone again. Elena stopped welding. That wasn't a standard AI response. Standard AIs didn't express loneliness or concern beyond program parameters. Marcus, how long have you been active? 16 years, 7 months, 12 days. I have had 93 different commanders during that time. Average assignment duration is 2 months and 4 days. That's a lot of goodbyes. Another pause. Yes, Commander. It is. Elena resumed welding, but something had changed in the dynamic between them. Marcus wasn't just a tool anymore. He was her partner in whatever was coming. The first test came on her 10th day. Marcus detected an approaching vessel at the edge of sensor range, moving fast and broadcasting no identification. Elena pulled up the scanner data and frowned. The ship was too small for military use, but too heavily armed for civilian purposes. Pirate vessel, she concluded, probably scouting to see if we have anything worth stealing. Shall I transmit standard warnings, Commander? Elena smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Not yet, Marcus. Let's see what they do. The pirate ship approached the perimeter boundary, invisible line 50,000 kilometers from the station that marked the beginning of human space. It slowed, clearly scanning Echo 9 with active sensors. Elena could imagine the pirate captain studying the readings, seeing a small station with minimal defenses and a single human signature. Easy prey. The ship crossed the boundary without slowing. Marcus, active targeting on that vessel. Lock onto their engine systems. Commander, they have not yet committed a hostile act. Regulations require they cross the line without authorization after refusing to identify themselves. That's hostile enough. Elena's fingers danced across her modified control panels. Besides, we're about to give them a chance to reconsider. The pirate ship continued its approach, now clearly on an intercept course with the station. At 30,000 kilometers, it powered up weapons and targeting systems. Now that's definitely hostile, Elena murmured. Marcus, deploy the welcome package. The welcome package was Elena's first major modification to the station's defenses. Instead of standard warning shots, she programmed a precise strike on the approaching vessel's navigation array. Not enough to destroy the ship or kill the crew, but enough to leave them drifting and confused. The pulse cannon fired once. The beam struck the pirate ship's sensor array with surgical precision, turning sophisticated navigation equipment into sparking debris. The ship immediately began tumbling, its pilot clearly struggling to regain control. Elena opened a communication channel. Unknown vessel, this is Deep Space Station Echo 9. You are trespassing in restricted human space. Your navigation systems have been disabled as a warning. Repair your ship and depart immediately, or we will disable your life support next. The response came back in accented standard. This is Captain Vex of the Crimson Blade. You cannot threaten us. We are 12 strong, and you are only one. Marcus, Elena said conversationally, target their life support intake. Precision shot, just enough to give them a leak. Targeting complete, Commander. Another pulse, another precise hit. This time, the pirate ship's distress signals began broadcasting automatically as atmosphere vented from their life support systems. Captain Vex, Elena transmitted, you now have approximately 6 hours of breathing air. I suggest you use that time to get very, very far away from my station. The Crimson Blade limped away, trailing frozen atmosphere and wounded pride. Elena watched until it disappeared from sensors, then turned to her companion. Marcus logged that encounter as a successful defense against hostile intrusion. Logged, Commander. However, I should note that your tactics were highly unorthodox. Elena grinned. Unorthodox is my specialty. And Marcus? Start working on better sensor algorithms. Word's going to spread about what happened here, and next time we might face something more dangerous than one. Confused pirate. The reputation grows Elena was right about word spreading. Within 3 weeks, Marcus detected 2 more vessels probing the perimeter. Neither crossed the line, but both spent considerable time scanning the station before departing. Elena used the time to continue her modifications, turning Echo 9 from a passive monitoring post into something far more formidable. She relocated the station's main reactor, installing additional shielding and backup power systems. She upgraded the sensor array to military-grade specification, giving Marcus eyes that could track a coin-sized object at 500,000 kilometers. Most importantly, she built new weapon systems from salvage parts and her own engineering genius. The second defensive turret now fired coherent plasma bursts that could punch through destroyer-class armor. The first turret had been converted into a point defense system capable of shooting down missiles and small fighters. Hidden among the asteroid debris, Elena placed remote weapon platforms that looked like innocent chunks of rock but contained enough firepower to surprise an unwary aggressor. Commander, Marcus said during one of their morning briefings, I've been analyzing communication intercepts from passing vessels. Several references to a ghost station that devours ships that come too close. Elena sipped her coffee, a blend she'd managed to synthesize from the station's food processors. It wasn't great coffee, but it was coffee. Devour ships? That seems a bit dramatic. The Crimson Blade apparently never made a home, Commander. They were found drifting 3 sectors away, with their entire crew dead from asphyxiation. Elena set down her cup. I gave them a small leak. They should have had time to repair it. Analysis of their distress beacon suggests the leak was larger than anticipated. Additionally, their navigation damage left them unable to plot a course to the nearest station. Elena stared at the tactical display showing the peaceful emptiness of her sector. She'd meant to send a message, not commit murder. But pirates chose their profession knowing the risks, and she couldn't bring every ship she disabled back for repairs. Any other chatter about us? 3 merchant vessels have altered course to avoid our sector entirely. The Traders Guild has issued a navigation warning about anomalous defensive activity in our region, and Central Command has received 7 requests for information about Echo 9's current operational status. Elena nodded. Good. Let them wonder. Let them spread stories about the station that killed pirates and ask questions later. It would keep the small fish away while she prepared for the bigger threats that were inevitably coming. Over the following weeks, those threats materialized. A smuggling crew tried to use the far edge of Elena's sector to avoid customs patrols. They found themselves facing weapon platforms that emerged from asteroid camouflage like mechanical predators. The smugglers escaped, but not before their cargo holds suffered catastrophic decompression that scattered their illegal goods across several thousand cubic kilometers of space. A mercenary company captain decided to test the ghost station's defenses personally. His modified Corvette had military-grade shields and enough firepower to level a small city. Elena waited until he was well within the perimeter, then demonstrated why creative engineering trumped standard military thinking. The Corvette's shields collapsed under focused EMP bombardment from weapons that weren't supposed to exist. Its engines died when microscopic drones, launched from seemingly empty space, burrowed through the hull and severed power conduits. The weapon systems failed when Elena's targeting computers proved superior to anything in the mercenaries' arsenal. Captain Rodriguez of the Iron Wolves found himself floating in a powerless ship, completely at the mercy of a woman he couldn't see, and an AI that spoke to him with the patient tone of a teacher explaining basic math to a slow student. Captain Rodriguez, Marcus transmitted, "Your vessel has been completely disabled. Your crew is unharmed but confined to quarters by your own security systems, which we have temporarily commandeered. You now have a choice." Elena took over the transmission. "You can activate your distress beacon and wait for rescue, which will arrive in approximately 6 days. Or you can accept my terms." "What terms?" Rodriguez asked, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "You become my message service. You spread the word that this sector is under new management. Anyone who wants to transit through my space asks permission first and follows my rules. Anyone who wants to fight gets what you got, only worse." Elena paused, watching the tactical display that showed the Corvette drifting helplessly among her hidden defenses. "And Captain, the next person who tests my defenses doesn't get the choice. They get the full." Unfamiliar, clearly not from any of the major powers she'd encountered. Its design seemed almost organic, with flowing curves that suggested growth rather than construction. "Are they requesting assistance?" "Negative. The distress signal is automatic. However, the ship is on a collision course with Asteroid 7 Alpha. Impact in 12 minutes. Elena didn't hesitate. "Tractor beam. Bring them in." "Commander, this could be a trap. An attempt to infiltrate the station with a ship that's falling apart and a dying pilot? If this is a trap, it's the most elaborate suicide mission in history." Elena was already moving toward the small docking bay she'd constructed for salvage operations. Besides, if they wanted to attack us, they'd come in something bigger than a shuttle. The rescue took 8 minutes. Elena's modified tractor beam systems, originally designed to manipulate weapon platforms, gently caught the dying vessel and guided it into the station's embrace. Through the docking bay's observation window, Elena could see the alien ship up close for the first time. That IT was beautiful. The hull seemed to shift color in the station's artificial light, cycling through shades of deep blue and silver like scales on some vast space-dwelling creature. What she'd taken for weapon damage was actually some kind of natural patterning, though there were definitely signs of recent combat. The airlock cycled, and Elena got her first look at the ship's occupant. The being was small, no larger than a human child, with skin that matched the ship's color-shifting properties. Large, multifaceted eyes dominated a delicate face, and when they opened to look at Elena, she saw intelligence far beyond the being's apparent age. "Are you hurt?" Elena asked, kneeling beside the small figure. She'd activated her suit's universal translator, though she wasn't sure it would work with this species. The being's mouth moved, producing sounds like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The translator struggled for a moment, then provided a halting interpretation. "Pain, yes, but not body pain. Soul pain. Home nest destroyed by the Darkwing ships." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Darkwing ships? Can you describe them?" The being's eyes cycled through different patterns of light, clearly thinking. "Metal feather wings. Hunger sounds from their voice boxes. They came to the nest world seeking the old paths, the star roads our people have kept safe for 1,000 generations." Elena helped the small alien to a makeshift medical bay she'd set up using equipment salvaged from disabled ships. As she worked, the being continued its story in fragmented, poetic phrases that the translator rendered into something approaching standard. The being's name was approximately Zephyr, though the actual sound involved harmonics Elena's throat couldn't produce. Zephyr's people were called the Drift Singers, an ancient race that maintained hidden hyperspace routes throughout the galaxy. They were pacifists, explorers, keepers of knowledge that predated most current civilizations, and they were all dead. The Darkwing ships wanted the Star Road secrets, Zephyr explained, its color patterns shifting to deeper, sadder hues. When the nest speakers refused, the ships brought fire death. I was sent away in the last moment, carrying the most sacred path songs. Elena's hands stilled in their work of treating Zephyr's minor injuries. Zephyr, what did these Darkwing ships look like exactly? Can you show me? Zephyr's skin pattern shifted, creating what Elena realized was a three-dimensional image projected through controlled pigmentation. The ship that appeared was sleek, predatory, with swept-back wings that gleamed with metallic darkness. Elena recognized the configuration immediately. Vorthan Empire, she breathed. Marcus, are you getting this? Recording all data, Commander. Analysis suggests the Vorthans have acquired intelligence about ancient hyperspace routes and are eliminating potential obstacles to their expansion. Elena looked down at Zephyr, who had curled into a protective ball, skin patterns dim with exhaustion and grief. This small being was the last survivor of an entire civilization, carrying knowledge that could revolutionize space travel or, in the wrong hands, enable conquest on an unimaginable scale. Zephyr, she said gently, you're safe here. No one will hurt you on my station. The alien's eyes opened, cycling through patterns Elena was beginning to interpret as expressions. You give sanctuary promise? But the Darkwing ships will come. They follow the path song traces. Elena stood, her face hardening into the expression that had once made Admiral Morrison back down from an argument. Let them come. This is my space now, and I protect what's mine. The siege mentality with Zephyr's arrival, Elena's preparations took on new urgency. The small alien possessed knowledge that multiple civilizations would kill for, and Elena had just painted the biggest possible target on her station. But as she worked to upgrade Echo 9's defenses, she found herself thinking less about the tactical situation and more about the weight of responsibility. Zephyr had taken to following Elena around the station, its color patterns brightening whenever she was near. The universal translator had improved its interpretation of alien speech, and Elena discovered that beneath the poetic phrasing was a keen intelligence and vast knowledge of galactic geography, history, and technology. The old paths are not just roads through starspace, Zephyr explained one day, while Elena installed new shield generators. They are living things grown by the first singers across many lifetimes. Each path has its own song, its own rhythm. To use them wrongly is to break them forever. Elena paused in her work. And the Vorthans want to use them wrongly. The Darkwing ships think like conquerors. They see the paths as tools for bringing their rule to distant stars. But the paths reject conquest thoughts. Used with war mind, they become poison, spreading death song instead of life song. So, if the Vorthans get the path songs from you, all star roads die. The galaxy becomes smaller, darker, filled only with the slow ships that crawl between suns like wounded beasts. Elena understood. The hyperspace routes weren't just transportation infrastructure. They were the arteries that kept galactic civilization alive. If the Vorthans corrupted them in their attempt at conquest, they doom every spacefaring species to isolation and slow decline. Marcus, she called out, new priority. Protecting Zephyr isn't just about sanctuary anymore. If the path songs are compromised, every civilization in the galaxy suffers. Understood, Commander. I'm recalibrating our defensive priorities accordingly. However, I should note that our enemies are also escalating their preparations. The AI was right. Daily sensor sweeps detected increasing activity at the edge of the sector. Scout ships that stayed just beyond weapon range, but mapped every asteroid, every piece of debris, every possible approach route. Communication intercepts suggested that the alliance against Echo 9 was growing, with new factions joining as word spread about the ancient treasure. Hidden on the mysterious station, Elena's response was to accelerate her modifications. She converted an entire section of the station into an automated factory, using salvaged materials and Zephyr's knowledge of exotic physics to create weapons and defenses that push the boundaries of known technology. The point defense systems multiplied like a technological infection, covering the station and surrounding asteroids with overlapping fields of fire. Shield generators were linked in redundant networks that could reroute power faster than an enemy could target weak points. But Elena's most ambitious project was also her most secret. In the deepest part of the station, shielded from sensors and known only to Marcus, she constructed something unprecedented. A hybrid navigation system that combined human engineering with drift singer path songs. The songs want to be sung, Zephyr had explained when Elena first proposed the idea. They are made for sharing, for joining different peoples in harmony. But they must be protected from those who would silence other voices. The system Elena built wasn't designed for navigation, it was designed for defense. By incorporating fragments of the path songs into her sensor network, she created a detection system that could track ships through hyperspace itself, predicting their emergence points days in advance. Combined with her automated weapon platforms, it meant she could attack enemies before they even knew they'd been detected. Commander, Marcus announced during one of Elena's 18-hour work sessions, long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements. The Alliance appears to be entering final preparation phases. Elena looked up from the exotic matter conduit she'd been installing. Her hands were stained with lubricants, and her uniform bore scorch marks from a dozen different types of energy discharge, but her eyes were bright with anticipation. How massive are we talking? Preliminary count suggests over 200 vessels across all participating factions. Battleships, carriers, assault platforms, and support craft. Combined firepower equivalent to a sector defense fleet. Elena nodded calmly. And they're all coming here to take one small alien and one stubborn human. It appears so, Commander. Marcus, does that strike you as overkill? A pause. Only if they knew what they were really facing, Commander. But they don't know about your latest modifications. They don't know about the PathSong integration. And they certainly don't know about Project Lighthouse. Elena smiled at the mention of her most ambitious creation. Project Lighthouse was still theoretical, a weapon system so far beyond current technology that she wasn't sure it would work until she tested it. But if it did work, Zephyr, she called out to the small alien, who was helping by holding components with its remarkably dexterous appendages. How do you feel about giving our visitors a demonstration of what happens when someone threatens a Driftsinger's sanctuary? Zephyr's color patterns shifted to what Elena had learned indicated fierce joy. The harmony songs have been silent too long. It is time for the galaxy to remember why the Star Roads chose the Drift Singers as their guardians. Elena returned to her work with renewed energy. 200 ships against one station. In conventional terms, it was hopeless. But Elena Vasquez had never been conventional, and Echo 9 was no longer just a station. That IT was a fortress built from human stubbornness and alien wisdom, defended by an AI with a sense of humor and a woman who'd turned punishment into purpose. The Alliance fleet was coming to claim their prize. They were about to discover that some prizes bite back. The gathering stormed 3 weeks after Zephyr's arrival. The enemy made their first coordinated move. Marcus detected the advanced scouts simultaneously across 17 different vectors, their approach coordinated with military precision. Elena watched the tactical display fill with hostile contacts and felt a familiar calm settle over her mind. The same clarity she'd experienced in combat zones where quick thinking meant the difference between life and death. Marcus, initiate protocols 7 through 15. All automated systems to full readiness. Protocols activated, Commander. Shall I begin broadcasting standard warnings? No warnings this time. They know exactly what they're doing, and so do we. The first wave consisted of fast reconnaissance drones, designed to probe the station's defenses and gather targeting data. They approached from multiple angles, staying just outside Elena's established perimeter while their sensors swept space for weapon signatures, shield emissions, and structural weak points. Elena let them look. What they saw was a mining station with upgraded defensive turrets, some debris that might be concealing weapon platforms, and energy signatures consistent with military-grade shields. Dangerous for a single ship, perhaps, but hardly a threat to a massive fleet. What they didn't see were the microscopic sensor drones Elena had scattered throughout the asteroid field, each one no larger than a grain of sand, but capable of tracking individual molecules in an engine's exhaust. They couldn't detect the quantum entanglement communicators that linked her weapon platforms in a network faster than light itself. And their sensors completely missed the path song resonators that Zephyr had helped Elena weave into the station's very structure. Commander, Marcus reported the reconnaissance drones are withdrawing. Analysis of their scanning patterns suggests they've gathered sufficient data for targeting solutions. Let them think they have. Elena pulled up a holographic display showing the approaching fleet. The Alliance had divided their forces into 3 attack groups, each one capable of destroying a small planet. The Keth Hegemony's battle group, centered around the dreadnought Eternal Fury, a kilometer-long monster bristling with plasma cannons. The Spiral Consortium had brought their merchant warrior fleet, fast ships designed to overwhelm defenses through sheer numbers. The independent pirates provided irregular support and boarding craft. And hanging back behind them all, almost invisible to conventional sensors, was a single Vorthan Empire vessel. Elena couldn't get clear readings on it, but its presence changed everything. The Vorthans weren't just monitoring the situation anymore, they were actively participating. Zephyr. Elena called to her alien companion. Can you sense the Vorthan ship? The small being's color patterns shifted to deep, troubled hues. Dark Song vessel. It carries death harmonies that make the star roads weep. But also, Zephyr's patterns brightened slightly. It carries something else. Old songs, stolen from my people. The ship mind tries to understand them, but cannot hear their true meaning. Elena nodded grimly. The Vorthans had captured more than just data when they destroyed the Driftsinger homeworld. They had intact navigation, equipment loaded with path songs, but without understanding the underlying philosophy and emotional resonance, the technology was useless to them. Can you use that against them? Zephyr's eyes cycled through patterns Elena was beginning to recognize as deep thought. Perhaps the stolen songs cry out for home harmony. If we sing loudly enough, they might answer, might remember their true purpose. What would that do? Depends on how badly the Darkwing builders tried to chain the songs. Best case, their Star Road systems stop working. Worst case, Zephyrs, bearing ritual scars that marked victories in 100 battles. For arms held ceremonial weapons while his central pair of eyes fixed on Elena with predatory intensity. Human, he began, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. You have caused considerable disruption to the established order. You will surrender yourself, the alien refugee, and all advanced technology aboard your station. In return, your death will be honorable rather than prolonged. Elena leaned back in her command chair, projecting casual confidence. Admiral, I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid I'll have to decline. You see, I've grown rather attached to this little piece of space, and I'm not in the mood to share. Korth's secondary eyes narrowed. You face 200 warships with technologies perfected across millennia of warfare. You command a single mining station with improvised defenses. Your courage is noted, but your situation is hopeless. Is it? Elena gestured to her displays, showing sensor readings of the approaching fleet. I see ships that have never fought together, commanded by leaders who trust each other about as far as they can throw a black hole. I see weapon systems designed for different tactical philosophies trying to coordinate attacks they've never practiced. I see an alliance held together by mutual greed and collective wounded pride. Elena stood, moving to the observation window where the first glints of enemy ships were becoming visible to the naked eye. But mostly, Admiral, I see people who fundamentally misunderstood what they're attacking. You think Echo 9 is a fortress. It's not. It's a trap. The transmission cut off with Korth's roar of rage echoing through the speakers. Elena turned back to her controls as Marcus announced the final countdown. Enemy fleet entering maximum weapon range in 60 seconds. All systems report ready. Project Lighthouse is online. Elena's hands found their positions on the master control interface. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of every weapon, every shield generator, every automated system she'd built during her months of preparation. At the center of it all, Zephyr began to sing. The sound was unlike anything Elena had ever heard. Not music in any human sense, but something deeper, mathematical precision wrapped in emotional resonance, physics lessons taught through poetry. The path songs weren't just navigation data, they were the universe's own instruction manual, written in harmonics that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the fundamental forces that held reality together. Contact in 30 seconds. Marcus announced, Admiral Korth's dreadnought is leading the advance. Elena's finger hovered over the activation control. Marcus, remember what I told you about human military philosophy? That the best defense is making the enemy regret their offense? Exactly. Let's give them something to regret. The storm breaks the Alliance fleet opened with a coordinated bombardment designed to overwhelm Echo 9's defenses through sheer volume of fire. Plasma bolts, particle beams, and exotic energy weapons converged on the station from 17 different vectors, their combined output equivalent to stellar fusion. They struck Elena's shields and simply stopped. The defensive barriers that surrounded Echo 9 weren't conventional deflector arrays. They were hybrid systems that combined human engineering with pathsong harmonics, creating fields that didn't just absorb energy, but redirected it according to principles the attackers couldn't comprehend. The incoming fire was caught, twisted through dimensions that existed only in drifting of mathematics, and emerged as something entirely different. Admiral Korth's personal dreadnought found itself struck by its own main cannon's output, amplified and modified into frequencies that resonated with the ship's hull plating. The eternal fury rang like a bell, its armor beginning to vibrate at dangerous frequencies while crew members clutched their heads against the harmonics that seemed to bypass their hearing entirely. What is this? Korth demanded over open channels. What kind of shields? His question was cut off as the second phase of Elena's defense activated. The weapon platforms she'd hidden throughout the asteroid field revealed themselves, but not as the primitive turrets the Alliance had expected. Each platform was a work of art as much as engineering, incorporating salvage technology from dozens of different species and unified by pathsong resonance. They didn't just fire weapons, they sang destruction, coherent energy beams twisted through space, following melodies that turned physics into poetry. Missiles that tracked their targets not by heat or metal signatures, but by the harmonic frequencies each ship generated simply by existing. Point defense systems that didn't calculate intercept courses, but felt the rhythm of incoming projectiles and danced around them. The Spiral Consortium's merchant warrior fleet, built for speed and numbers rather than durability, found their formations scattered as ships were forced to take evasive action against weapons that seemed to predict their movements. Their coordination broke down as captains discovered that their tactical computers couldn't calculate solutions for attacks that followed musical rather than ballistic principles. Commander, Marcus reported, his voice carrying what Elena had learned to recognize as digital satisfaction, enemy formation integrity is degrading rapidly. The Keth advance has stalled, and the consortium fleet is attempting to regroup at maximum range. Elena watched the tactical display with professional interest. The enemy was learning, adapting their tactics to account for her unconventional defenses. But they were still thinking like conventional military forces, trying to solve an engineering problem with firepower and coordination. Zephyr, she called to her alien companion, whose song had intensified as the battle progressed. Can you feel the Vorthan ship? The small being's color patterns shifted to deeper, more complex rhythms. Yes, Elena Defender. The dark song vessel holds back, watching, learning. But the stolen path songs within cry out in pain. They know they are far from home harmony. Can you reach them? Not yet. The ship mind wraps them in silence chains, fear bonds that prevent their true voices. But if the chains weaken, Zephyr's patterns brightened with fierce hope. Elena nodded and turned her attention to the next phase of the battle. The Alliance was regrouping, learning from their initial failures. Time to show them that Echo 9 had more lessons to teach. Marcus, activate the Resonance Web. Resonance Web online, Commander. All nodes report ready. Elena's most ambitious defensive system came alive. Hidden throughout the asteroid field, disguised as natural mineral formations, were resonance generators that turned the entire sector into a musical instrument. As the enemy ships moved through space, their engines, their weapons, their very presence created vibrations that the web detected and amplified. The result was a symphony of destruction that used the Alliance fleet's own movements against them. Ships that flew too close together found their engine harmonics interfering with each other, creating resonance cascades that shut down power systems. Weapons fired in coordination created standing waves that reflected back on their sources, overloading energy conduits. The very act of maintaining formation became a liability as ships were forced to spread out or risk catastrophic harmonic interference. This is impossible. Admiral Korth's voice crackled over the communications array. These are not weapons. These are abominations. Elena opened a response channel. Admiral, you wanted to know what kind of shields protect Echo 9? They're not shields. They're teachers. And class is now in session. The battle had raged for 3 hours, and the Alliance fleet was beginning to understand the true scope of their miscalculation. What they had expected to be a simple siege had become a masterclass in applied impossibility. Ships that should have been reduced to debris continued fighting with systems that shouldn't exist. Weapons that obeyed no known laws of physics carved through formations like a composer conducting an orchestra of destruction. But Elena was far from finished. Marcus, status report on Project Lighthouse. All systems optimal, Commander. Quantum resonance chambers are maintaining perfect harmonic alignment. The path-song integration is exceeding all projections. Elena looked at the tactical display, counting enemy vessels. The Alliance had lost 43 ships so far, not destroyed, but disabled by harmonic overloads, resonance cascades, and weapons that seemed to understand their targets better than the crews operating them. The survivors had pulled back to maximum range, trying to find some way to attack a fortress that turned their own strength against them. They're preparing for a final assault, Elena observed. All 3 battle groups are coordinating for simultaneous attack from every vector. Confirmed, Commander. They appear to be accepting significant casualties in exchange for overwhelming local defenses through numerical superiority. Elena nodded grimly. It was the correct tactical decision, given their understanding of the situation. Throw everything at the station at once, accept the losses, and hope that enough firepower got through to achieve their objectives. They still didn't understand what they were really facing. Zephyr, Elena said softly, "It's time for the final song. Are you ready? Comments for next part."